Witches. Yep, DSP. I remember watching that guy. I've never been much of a gamer, but I remember watching that guy back in the day. Just because he was on there. And it was like same with like what was the movie critic? There's a guy with the glasses. He was a movie critic, nostalgia critic. That guy. You know, these like YouTubers that were around, kind of back in the day when it was a little more, you know, more of a smaller place than it is now. My kid asked me, "How come you didn't get into YouTube, Dad, when it first came out? You know, you're an artist and you've always been interested in photography and the arts and stuff." But I'm not gonna lie, like I remember when YouTube came out. I also remember back in them days, you know, 2005-ish, 6-ish, 7-ish, like what it cost to buy a digital camera or a camcorder or a laptop, like a desktop computer. You know, just those three things I said right there were in the thousands. Like I was poor growing up, man. We didn't have camcorders and you know all that kind of stuff. So it was still kind of hard to do that stuff when it first came out for certain people. You know, by the time it got accessible, really to a point where I could afford it and it was realistic. I mean, YouTube was more of the beast that it is today than what it was back then. So that's why I tell my kid. That's why I try to encourage him. Like, hey, you know, you should start trying to exploit this as much as you can these days. You know, because anybody can do it now, and but that also opens up the door of like, well, yeah, anybody can do it. So, you know, it's almost harder to get noticed when everybody can do it. Like that book I showed you earlier. This one, this one right here, the Top Secret Coloring Book. You know, that's been done for like 5 years, and I had it on Amazon, and it looked like this. Think of something, curiosity, you know, cover-ups and everything anymore, and I didn't like the cover because it's tagging, and not that I don't like tagging, but it was hard for people to understand. So I went back to redo the cover, and when I did, you know, here's the book, the only one they ever sent me, Amazon, and it says not for resale, and then after that, they just like could not reproduce that. I just said, why can't you just reproduce that, you know, and they just could not pull it off for whatever reason. So I took it as a sign from the universe to get it off of the self-publishing racket because I'd only sold like 10 copies, and they were all to like my mom and my friends. And I said, well, I should try and give it a shot in a traditional publishing sense. And most of them said, well, you know, if they get back to me, which a fair amount of them did, say, well, we don't publish coloring books, and sorry, you know, so I'll probably end up trying to self-publish it again, but like I said, like for whatever reason, when I send Amazon the specs, you know, the paper sizes and how I want it and all that, they just can't do it. They cannot just, you know, edit it and redo it. So one day I'll get back on it. But in the meantime, you know, when I did that whole coloring book thing, the coloring book craze was a lot hotter than it is now. So, you know, we'll see what happens. I might just end up using those images for other projects. We'll see what happens. Yeah, in the meantime, I'm doing this, but also what I did when I sent out, because what I did is I'd look up publishing companies, and I got the PDF file of the front back cover of the book and then the interior, and I'd send it to these publishing companies, pretty much knowing they're going to say no. But one of the things I did say is at the moment I'm working on a graphic novel, my first one, so it's going to be a little bit, but at the moment I'm working on a graphic novel, and I always told them that I was doing that. And I actually got a fair amount of response from people, from the publishers, that said, you know, sorry, we don't do the coloring books, yada yada, but we will take a look at your graphic novel once you're done. No rush, send it out. A lot of them would say, your illustrations are very great, we like them a lot, very talented, but again, we don't do the coloring books. But send us a copy of your graphic novel when it's done. So, kind of started trying to get my foot in the door a little bit with these people. And it's going to be another 6-8 months before my graphic novel's done. Just because it's the first one I've ever done. It's going to be over 100 pages. I'm 2/3 of the way done with the rough draft stage at this moment. And yeah, so it's a work in progress. And then there's just life too, raising a kid full time, working part time, that kind of thing. So it's a work in progress, but it will get done. And it's just a matter of time management. Now you see how I just did like the bark and stuff on the tree here. Doing little lines I could see in the tree bark, Do a little more line type sketching. But yeah, so it was nice to hear from these people, because a lot of companies will just send you back an automated, yeah, we're not, blah, blah, blah. We don't do that. Thanks for submitting. If you haven't heard from us within this amount of time, try back type thing. So it was nice to get a lot of these, a person was behind it saying, oh, I like the illustrations and blah, 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 and get back to us. So that was actually, for being told no, it was actually very encouraging, So it was nice to hear that. But yeah, like I said, in the meantime, their life, you got life, I got an older mother, I got a small family, but I still got one up here, and got my kid I'm raising by myself, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just a matter of some old-fashioned time management, which isn't a big deal. I've usually been pretty good about that. A lot of artists aren't very comfortable drawing freehand, and I wasn't either in the beginning, but I'm actually very comfortable doing it now, and simply because when you're an artist, you gotta embrace happy accidents, as Bob Ross used to say. Something I figured out with ink is, my forte, I guess you could say, is pen and ink, watercolor. You do the pen and ink like this and you color it with watercolor. And something you can't control is watercolor. You can control ink, but accidents happen, and it's a matter of how you adapt to said accident. Do you freak out and tear it up, or do you adapt it? I chose to adapt. So using ink freehand just makes you more, in my opinion, accepting of how things will be and how they're going to turn out. And if not, then you can always fix it. It's like anything else. So we're making our little alien tree here. The tree, is it alien? Is it on Earth? So I'm going to stick an oil can right here because I don't like how that's looking. And that will be one of the cans that's been eaten by nature. Yeah, so hopefully if I build this up, I can keep plugging these out. I figure I can do a couple videos like this a week while the kid's at school or whatever, and go like that. So let's draw the old oil can sticking out of here. It's kind of jarring because it's, oil can. Yep, there's the oil can. Yep. So the oil will be getting enveloped by the tree. And then it'll be like bleeding out from here, I'm thinking. Yeah. Oh, let me stand up here and get a perspective of this. Yeah, there we go. Maybe one day I'll dig out the old original one that I did of this in life drawing and show you guys. If my channel ever gets big enough. Hopefully it does. We'll see what happens. If it is meant to be, then it is meant to be. Hopefully it's meant to be, because it'd be nice to pay back those student loans. You know? Oh, yeah. Silly goose. Silly goose. Student loans. Yeah, student loans. What a racket, I'm telling you. You know, if you're going to be a doctor or an engineer or something, sure, go to college. But, you know, I'm recommending to my kid, pick up a trade. And, you know, I'm kind of, I'm okay with the military. But with all the stuff going on in the world these days, I don't know. Not as much in favor as I used to be about it. Not as in favor as I used to be. Man, I still believe in it, just, I don't know. You know, when you have a kid, you'll know. But, yeah, I try to tell him, hey man, get yourself a job being a pipe fitter, you know. Be a pipe fitter, be anything, you know, other than an art major. And, you know, if I'm able to turn this into any kind of career that's worth a damn, that'll be great. But for every person like that, there's, you know, 500 people that couldn't pull it off. So we got our oil can there. I'll get a little more contrast going on here, so let's see what we can do here. Get a couple darker ones over here. Couple darker ones. So yeah, you know, it'd be nice to eventually get all the student loans paid off and be able to say, wow, you know, going to college sure worked. So I'll tell you, ever since I graduated, it's been kind of it's been weird, it's been crazy. I mean, granted, I didn't look as hard as I could have when I graduated college in 2008. When I graduated college in 2008, you know, I graduated right before, either right before or right after the collapse happened. Either way, the last thing people were looking for was illustrators, you know. And at that time, you know, I feel like there's been a bit of a pendulum shift, you know, because like anything in life, there's a way things are done for a long time, and then there's a new way pops up, and that way kind of takes over. And then people get tired of that way, and they kind of gravitate back to the old way of doing things. You know, like think about like when movies used to have special effects, a lot more, you know, practical effects, a lot more in-camera effects. You know, think of the movies in the 80s, in the 90s, but then think Jurassic Park came out in 93. And that showed people what CGI could do. And people were amazed. And I was one of them. I was a kid. I watched that movie 47 times in the theater over 2 years. 47 times. Watching the dollar theater, all that. Anyway, people were amazed. Wow, look what you can do. And it just blew everything out of the water that existed before. But then, as the 90s went on, you know, crappier and crappier movies, just chock full of CGI, and like the worst CGI too. You know, think like, what was that one with The Rock? The Mummy, you know, Scorpion King or whatever. Think about how horrible that was. I mean, it's like a freaking meme today. It was so bad. So people get tired of it, and the pendulum shifts. to something else. And now you get movies where people are excited to hear, oh, there's a bunch of practical effects, you know, like the new Star Wars ones that have been made lately, you know, by Disney. They've been using a lot of practical effects, and that's about the only saving grace in those movies. I mean, I shouldn't say that. They're not all bad. I mean, just most of them. Yeah, that's most of them. But, yeah, so people, you know, something comes around and people are enthralled with it, and then it gets old, you know, and people are sick of it. Just kind of like AI, you know? AI hasn't even reached a fraction of what it's going to be able to do, and people are already like, oh, I'm sick of this. Every time I see a video online, you know, people are bitching about it being AI. So there's this channel I watch actually called Bedtime Stories, and it's kind of associated with that one Wartime Stories. And whoever runs that channel, they use traditional illustrating like this and incorporate it into their video in a way where it tells the story and it's really good. And I'll go in the comment section and I'll see a lot of that from people. Thank you so much for using, you know, real illustrations and no AI stuff. You know, I'm getting tired of AI. And so I believe the pendulum is shifting again in respect and regard to, you know, people want to see personality again in their art. You know, the imperfection of trying to draw a straight line, you know. That's why I draw all these, my doodles that I make into doodle stories. I draw them with, you know, just freehand, you know. And yeah, the lines aren't perfectly straight, but that's the whole point. They're not supposed to be perfectly straight. You know, they're supposed to be, you know, just off enough that your eyeball catches it and knows that's not a straight line, you know? That's not a straight line. So that's the idea, and people are gravitating back to that whole train of thought when it comes to art and all sorts of stuff in that wheelhouse. And I'm happy for that. Not just because it gives people like me a second wind. I mean, that's one part of it, I guess, but